is here. Oops, back up. Wrong way. Sorry. This would be the outer covering here. Now this white stuff that looks like fuzz, that's more into the soft tissue. But when we're looking at the bones, this is the bone here. And here's inside is the medullary cavity. This is where your bone marrow is. This is red bone marrow inside. This here is all very dense, strong bone. So if you're going to be a radiologist, you're going to see a lot of these bones. Sometimes you're going to find you'll have areas where you'll have a break, like a really thin translucent line this way, and that'll indicate a break. Or sometimes these bones will be all pockmarked. There's little spots all over them like this, where the bones are just kind of falling apart. The calcium is leaving those bones, and they become mottled. They become brittle, and they can break very easily just because those holes kind of line up and make weakness, and boom, off they go. They can break so quickly.
Do we have hollow bones?
No, our bones have things in them like either calcium themselves, they're solid that way, or they have bone marrow inside of them. Now birds have hollow bones. If you take a bird bone, like a chicken bone, and break it, it'll be hollow. There's a little bit of bone marrow in there, but they're really hollow inside. They're not as thick and strong. To try to break the femur, we'll show you this Thursday. It's very big and strong bone. It can be used for a club or a hammer. It's that strong. But bird bones are very easy to break, and that makes them also susceptible to damage very easily. Now, we have different layers of the bone. We have the endosteum, which is the inside of the bone. Then we have the periosteum, which is the outside of the bone. So we have differences on the way that they work. The endosteum has the osteoblasts and osteoclasts to help to remodel the bones, and it changes the bone as it goes along. Now we have several different kinds of bones. We have the main two types, the spongy bones and cancellous bones. Really hard bones and fairly soft bones. Some of the bones are not as strong and as hard as others. Remember we talked about the ethmoid, how soft and brittle it was, delicate. Other bones are very, very strong and thick. Now, a lot of that has to do with the amount of pressure or amount of weight that's put upon those bones. We looked at the cervicals. They're small, delicate little bones. The lumbar vertebrae are big, beefy, and strong because of the weight difference. The amount of weight that they have to support is held on by those bones. Now, inside the bone, we have different layers and different parts of the bone. You're going to look at the bones as kind of like big tubes, inside of tubes. And around these tubes are hard matrix. So if I would take a bunch of pencils and put them all together in a big bunch, you can see that you have, if they're all flat, you can see that the lead looks like a canal in between, and then the wood around your pencil would be the matrix around it. And then there's be spaces between each one of those, right? And then we coat that all around the outside of it with this periosteum to hold it all in place, the cancellous bone. What that does, it allows for the blood vessels to run up and down the bones to carry lots of nutrients to the bones. So we can get calcium in, calcium out. We can have blood vessels that run to the sides to feed all the cells of the bones, not just the ones up and down, but all the cells of the bones, and form those very strong canals and matrix of networks of blood vessels. Okay, so we have what they call a Haverson system, or osteon, and this is the structural unit of a bone. It has different layers called lamellae. These helps with weight-bearing processes of the bone, and then we have the central Haverson tubes or canals, and these contain the blood vessels. Then we have the Volkmann's or perforating canals that go at right angles to these bigger canals. And throughout this whole area we have little gaps, little spaces where the osteocytes live. That's their little houses. They live in there and they do the functioning of the bone itself. Then we have these little, what they call caniculi, hair-like canals that connect all the lacunae together. So we have communication, we have sharing of nutrients throughout the whole part of it. Now our bones are very strong, and if you put pressure on them in the proper direction, they will not break very easily. But if you change that and you put pressure on an opposing direction from their stress orientation, they will break very easily. At one point, I had broken a leg and I got stuck in a hospital, and they'd come wheeling in this guy, and he was a mess. He had his legs up in the air, his arms were all bandaged up. It looked like he was a mummy. He had so much bandages and casts on him. And I go, "What are you in for, buddy?" I was just joking around with him because we were both in the hospital. And he says, "Well, kind of stepped off a 4-story parkade. You know, and I was still kind of sleepy and stuff. I didn't click in my mind, but this guy had stepped off the top of a parking ramp. Landed 4 stories down. He didn't fall, he stepped off, as we found out, because that's about the same time the psychiatrist came in to talk with him. You know, he was a mess. His pelvis was shattered, his legs were shattered, his arms were broken, his back was broken. He was looking at least 6 months being in a nursing home, recovering, at least 6 months. His wife came in and really just, well, she was torqued. And that's good that she was. I mean, anyway, that's what happens to the bones. If you put them in the wrong position, in the wrong stress, they will break. But normally, they're very, very strong. You don't break bones very easily. It has to take some time. So these trabeculae, these long lines inside the bones, give us strength. Creates a tensile strength that doesn't make it so that they break very easily. If you take somebody's arm and you kind of bend it, you may feel a little bit of a bend, but it doesn't break very easily. There's kind of elasticity almost. And that's where we have these cells that are letting this do it. So the bones themselves are 1/3 organic and 2/3 inorganic. So what does that mean? Inorganic versus organic? Carbon? Is that what we're looking at?
Isn't that what the difference between organic and inorganic?
Yep. So what would that be for the bones, though? So our bones are not made of all carbon. Okay. So in this case, we're looking at things that are carbon-based. Molecules that are carbon-based versus molecules that are not carbon-based. So most of the bones are, as you can see as we go along, are mostly calcium carbonate and calcium hydroxyapatite. Those are the chemicals that are in the bones. Plus some magnesium and phosphorus and phosphates and different other minerals that are there. Those are the inorganic 2/3. The organic 1/3 would be the cells. The cells. Okay, the matrix cells, those are made up of organic materials. So we have the osteogenic cells like the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Those give up the 1/3 of our, it's like the soft part of it. The other 2/3 is the hard part. We always think of bones as being so hard and just kind of dry and brittle. But inside we have these microscopic little cells living inside of our bones, surrounded by this really hard matrix called the bone tissue. Okay? And that's called the osteoid. So we have the ground substance, we have fibers, collagen fibers, that gives it strength, but a little bit of elasticity. Now little kids, they have really good bones because they bend a lot. Some of these kids, when they're really tiny, their bones haven't even formed yet. They're not even solid yet. So you can take a little baby's bone and go, move it back and forth like this, you know. They might cry and scream at you and try to bite you or whatever, right? But they can move. The problem comes in is they're also partly cartilage. And if you break that bone, if you break that cartilage, it heals slower than the bone will itself. So you have to be careful with babies. Hydroxyapatite. This is a mineral salt of bones. 65% of the bone mass is calcium minerals. So we have 85% hydroxyapatite and 10% calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is the same stuff that you have out on the road. The rocks that make up a gravel road are calcium carbonate. You go into a limestone cave, that's limestone, calcium carbonate. Now sometimes people go out and they'll get calcium pills, and they're calcium carbonate pills. They're not the best type of calcium, but they're usable. We have to get it digested, then it can use it. So calcium hydroxyapatite is probably the best form of calcium that you can buy. It's very expensive, but it's very simple and very assimilable by your body. You can get it into your system very easily. And that helps with the fluoride, the potassium, and the magnesium salts that are in there. So bone marrow is inside your bones. It have red bone marrow, and then as you get older it turns almost yellow. It has fat in it. It becomes more liquidy as you get older also. In babies it's very good, very strong, but it has to build up also. As they mature, it gets better and stronger as we go along. So we find this usually in the heads of the femur, the humerus, and between your flat bones, like your ribs, places like that, your pelvis. You can get the bone marrow out. Now this is just a picture of bone marrow. They've taken a spoon and kind of scraped out the bone marrow of the medullary cavity inside the bone. They've sliced the bone lengthwise, and they've just kind of gouged it out. Now, animals love the bone marrow. It's so rich in nutrients. It's got lots of good cells in it. It's got some good vitamins and minerals and all that stuff that it's really nutritious. So, what's that? You can eat the bone marrow and take your chicken and break up those, suck the bone marrow out of it. There's some bone marrow in those chicken bones. Yep. So you can get the bone marrow and you can eat it. You'll see like lions and tigers and bears, oh my, they will break those bones to get the bone marrow out of them. They'll chew on them and chew on them. If you have a dog at home, they're not chewing on that bone just to chew on them. One thing is they like to chew on to keep their teeth sharp and clean, but they also want to get to that bone marrow. That's the goody part. And it's embedded in their brain to try to get to that bone marrow. So don't go to sleep at night if your dog's hungry for bone marrow. No, just kidding. He won't get you. So the main cells of the bone, the soft part of it, we have the osteogenics, which was the osteoprogenitor cells. These are the stem cells in the periosteum and the endosteum that make the bones remodel, constantly changing the bones. We have the osteoblasts that lay down new bone material, new matrix. Then we have the osteocytes that are the mature cells, and then we have the osteoclasts that tear down the cells, tear down the bones themselves. So there's little cells that will dissolve the bones and little cells that lay down the bones. Osteoblasts create, the osteoclasts break it down. Now, why would this be beneficial? Why is this beneficial for us? Why is it nice that we have this ability to put down new bones material and then take away the old bone material? Angel. Makes it stronger. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if it didn't, wouldn't we all just start getting those little holes in our bones, like you said?
Yeah, we have to put it back. So what do we use calcium for? Does anybody know what we use calcium for other than in our bones? How about muscles? Do we need calcium for our muscles? Yes. We have to have calcium for our muscles. That helps us to, our muscles have to have calcium for contraction and for relaxation. Without calcium, we end up with muscle spasms all over the place. So sometimes you're laying in bed and all of a sudden, wham, those things hit you. It could be because you don't have enough oxygen going on, or enough water, or enough calcium in your system. You need to get calcium in. Yes?
What's that, like the restless leg syndrome?
Restless leg syndrome, that's more of a nervous thing that it makes the muscles twitch, and it has a little bit to do with calcium, but B complex works really good to solve the muscle restless leg syndrome. B complex, I found it works pretty good for a lot of people, not everybody. But it's like the nerves are overexcited and it makes the muscles kind of twitch and kind of feel weird, like they're crawling. Yeah, I've had that before. That's no fun. But sometimes it's just poor circulation or just you're lacking in something in your diet to make that happen. So when you're embryonically developed, when you become conceived, and this happened for many of you a long time ago, you didn't have any bones. You first started out as cartilage. Just all your arms and your legs were just buds of cartilage. But we have to convert that from cartilage to bone. And the way that we do that is we have this, the bone becomes infiltrated with blood vessels. Or the cartilage, I should say, becomes infiltrated with blood vessels, and it gradually turns your cartilage into bone. Each part of it becomes harder and harder as we go through. And this is where babies have 270 bones, adults have 206. Because when you are developing, those bones will grow independent of each other and then fuse together later, like the lower jaw, the upper jaw, right? All those are separate bones initially, but when they come together, they count them as one. So most bones will ossify from the ends outward. They grow longer. So ossification is when we have the cartilage turning from cartilage to bone. And we call it osteogenic. Osteo is bone, genic is creating bone. So if you had neo-osteogenic, that'd be creating new bone. So we have different stages. We have the bone formation, which begins about the second month after conception. So 8 weeks after conception, we start making bones. Up to this point, we're just basically really soft, pliable little, what was that guy's name that used to be able to pull on him and stretch him? Gumby? Gumby or something? Stretch Armstrong? Something like that. Really stretchy and gooey and not really solid. About this time, 2 months, about the same time that we are becoming boys and girls, we actually can differentiate between boys and girls, we start putting on bones. We start laying down calcium. The blood vessels start infiltrating the cartilage, and this is what we get. After we're born, we create bigger and better bones. This goes all the way through puberty into adolescence. Once we get out of adolescence and adulthood, we stop growing, usually, normally. Unless we have some type of pituitary problem, we will stop. Girls stop around age 16, 17 usually. Guys, 19, 20, maybe 21. That's their maximum growth spurt. Okay, depending a lot on when you start changing as far as your hormonal system, that makes a big difference too. Or if you hardly ever stop. But bone remodeling is a lifelong thing. We're always constantly tearing down our bones and then building them back up again, making them stronger. And one of the reasons why we do this, or one of the laws we look at, is called Wolff's Law. Now, Wolff's Law states that the more stress that you put upon a bone, the stronger it becomes. So those of you that work at nursing homes or have worked at nursing homes, If you go up to one of the residents there and you push on their shoulder blade, it'll go back and forth like it's soft and mushy, really delicate. If you go down to the gym, let's say you go down to the Y or up here to CrossFit, and you push on one of their scapulas, their shoulder blades, it's going to go, ugh. There's not going to be any movement at all. It's going to be hard. What's the difference?
Strong.
It's
Being used more. So if you have, let's go back to the first thing we talked about in class, right? When we have, the bones have to give us support for the muscles so that we can pull upon to make the body move, right? So if you have this framework and it becomes inactive, we don't need a lot of stress, or we don't put a lot of stress on the bones, they start to get lighter and softer. If you exercise, you put some stress on those bones, then the body says, oh, wait a minute, if I pull real hard with my muscles, I could break this bone. So it puts more calcium into those bones to make them stronger, make them thicker, bigger, so that you can pull harder with those muscles to make your body move better. A good example of this is pitchers. The guys that are out on the mounds for the baseball teams, Chicago Cubs, are throwing these balls 100 miles an hour, boom, 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 right? Their arm gets thicker and thicker, bigger, as they get stronger. So it gets to a point where they're not going to get super huge. I mean, it's not going to be like this big around the bone, but the bone gets thicker and stronger so that you can put a lot more pressure on it. Sometimes, if there's a deficiency of minerals or something, or maybe a tumor in the arm, there's pitchers have thrown so hard that they break their arm. It just snaps right in mid-throw.
Their pitching arm is gonna, like the bone in their pitching arm is gonna be larger than in their catching arm, like the arm they don't throw with.
Slightly. Yep. It's not going to be like twice as big, but it's going to be slightly bigger. If it does break, it's because of something's wrong in there. There's something wrong with the bone. And that messes up the pitchers really bad because they can never throw as hard after that because they always think, oh, it's going to break again. Something's wrong in there, it's going to break again. And that can be a problem. But they will remodel with rest, and they can go back and make sure that there's no tumors in there, and then they'll be fine. So Wolff's Law. Swimmers doesn't apply to this. If you're a swimmer, you're not going to get enough stress on the bones to make the bones bigger and stronger. If you are a weightlifter, that's when you really start to do this. Someone walking, using weights, putting stress on those bones. If you're a gymnast or any of those things, you're putting stress, making the muscles in the bones bigger and stronger. Some of these gymnasts are really, their bones are strong because their muscles are so strong that the bones have to be able to hold them. Okay, so intermembranous versus chondral bones. Okay, there's two types. When you're a baby, when you're first becoming developed, we have these membranes, and some of those membranes will fill up with calcium and make a flat bone, like in your head. The inside of your skull are flatter bones, and they're created by these membranous tissues. So on the outside, it kind of reminds me of like an Oreo cookie. On the outside, you have a really hard crust. Then you have some mush in the inside, and then another hard crust on the other side, right? Oreos, yeah, those are good. So inside of it is kind of hollow. So we call these the spongy bones, the cancellous bones. But the outside is very tough. To make the intermembranous bones from a membrane, we have the membrane becomes solidified on the top and the bottom, and the inside becomes softer. Forms flat bones like your clavicles, your cranial bones. Bones that are more hollow inside than the others. The osteoclasts will go in, they'll create the bone marrow cavity, and then they also will produce the stronger outer covering of it. form it like a sandwich. The endochondral bones are more from just cartilage. A big piece of cartilage formed in the right place will get blood vessels that run to it, and then the blood vessels bring the calcium stays in place, and it creates the bone, makes the bone harder because the osteoblasts are laying down the calcium. They're stimulated to lay down the calcium in those bones, and it makes them stronger. So on the ends of these bones, we have the growth plate. Now, if you break your growth plate, it stops the growth of the bone. The bones grow from the middle outward. Now, in some places in the world, they don't like to be short. Japan is one of them. Some of the Oriental countries like that, they don't want to be short. They found out that people that are taller do much better in business. I don't know. You'll figure that, right? Yes?
I fractured my growth plate, and I swear it's never been the same.
It probably will never be. If
Because
you,
it was like in my thumb, and it doesn't go all the way down.
you got some scar tissue, and your thumb may be a little bit shorter than the other side, too. Depends on when you did it.
Third grade.
Third grade? Could
Somebody
be.
jumped on top of me and broke it. Off the side.
Could be. You didn't destroy it completely, otherwise your thumb would be really, really short. So, but so what they do is they go in and they have their legs broken. They break their legs, and then they put a stretcher. So they stretch the legs out this way longer, and then they put like braces, and then they let the bone fill in between the break, and then 2 years later they'll go in and break them again, and then it stretches them so they're a couple inches taller.
They look really like Adam.
Not if you wear pants. Yeah.
I just imagine like somebody with like long legs, but like just nubby arms with
Well, they're not really super long that way. And the thing about legs is, you have to remember that most people, their torsos are about the same length, but it's their legs that make them tall. Like Shaq, he's big all the way around, but if you look at his legs, he's like got 7-foot legs, right? They're just huge, long. So if you put people up back to back, they're about the same size. That's why when you sit in a place like this, there's not a lot of big differences between when people sit, but when they stand up, then you can see huge differences, and it's mostly leg length. So, and that's the long bones growing. If they break at the ends, then they become shorter. So you could have one leg that is longer than the other, maybe sometimes even this far if you broke the plate at the wrong time. Epiphyseal plate, the growth plate. So this is a diagram of how this works. We start out with calcium inside the blood vessels, but there's not much calcium inside the cartilage, right? Pretty much just basically cartilage. Then the blood vessel comes in, brings in the calcium and the nutrients necessary to harden the bones, and then as it goes, it becomes more and more infiltrated with the blood vessels. It lays down the calcium, this brown area, and this area here and here is where the bone is growing from. And it grows in this direction, lengthwise. That way, okay? So this is the epiphyseal plate. The bone marrow is in the middle here. Bless you. Got the hiccups. There's a way to stop those too. What are hiccups? Since you got them, let's talk about them.
Okay, let's call me out now.
Isn't it like air bubbles and whatnot?
Air bubbles in the stomach?
Like diaphragm, like, keeps you up to its own word. Contractions.
Yep. Like little spasms of the diaphragm. Little spasms of the diaphragm. So what's a cure for them?
Hyperventilating.
Hyperventilating?
It works.
So why do you get them if like you
Point if
drink
you
pop
let your
or
breath pass out, but
alcohol or
stop.
something like that?
Yeah, because that's
Hold on, hold on to that one for a second. Angel,
You have to drink water and hold your breath.
drink water and hold your breath. While you're doing what?
I heard pickle juice works too.
What? Pickle.
Drink pickle juice out of a jar, it works.
And something that's scary.
Okay, so if we hyperventilate, drink a pickle juice, and what'd you say, Angel?
I said, drink water, hold your breath,
Well, wait a minute now. We can't hold our breath and hyperventilate at the same time. Something's got to go wrong here. How do we change that? Question up here is, why does it get worse when you drink alcohol and sometimes pop? It's carbonated. What does carbonation do to your stomach and your muscles? Actually, by drinking, if you get hiccups, if you drink something sweet, it relieves the hiccups better than anything that I've ever found. Even sweet. Because the sugar has a kind of a paralytic effect on the diaphragm. It makes it so it's weaker. Yes? You drink too quickly, especially if it's, yeah.
Every time I eat something, like that's kind of spicy and stuff, I get like
Hiccups? Bread? Bread does it too, yeah. Some people get gas from eggs or different things like this, and that's burping, but the hiccups can be just an irritation to the diaphragm. So it could be a lot of things. Even if your neck is out of place, there's people that have they've had hiccups for years, like 20 years without stopping.
What? And they didn't think to worry about it sooner than 20 years later.
They couldn't, no one could fix them. They go to the doctors and they said, we can't help you, you just have hiccups. Unless you go in and cut the nerve to the diaphragm, and you can't do that because you have to breathe, right? So they have for years and years had hiccups. I mean, 24 hours a day, night and day, you hiccup.
So then how do you, how do you actually get
You couldn't even go to school or get a job really, because that'd just be I couldn't. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be terrible? You'd have to be like a hermit.
You get bad references and stuff.
Right.
Don't hire this guy.
No. You couldn't sleep, you couldn't eat, you couldn't, without having to, wait a second, I got a hiccup, those type of things. So there are some things you have to look at, whether the nerve supply to the diaphragm are working properly, the diet that you're on, a lot of things can affect it. 2 minutes, we got 2 minutes, so let's go on.
I have a question for you quick though.
Yeah.
On that, on the endochondral classification, are
Mhm.
you gonna have them what's that? Because this is about when I switched over to having memory.
Uh-huh.
So you basically want them to know that the blood vessel comes in that brings new nutrients, and then it can start laying down.
Uh-huh.
There's specific names. What's that bud? Periosteal bud. Do you want them to know those individual things, or do you want the broad concept?
Broad concept.
The broad concept. Okay.
Yep. So there's different ways. So look over the intermembranous and the chondral ossification, and we'll talk about this on Wednesday. Come in. Make sure that you're coming